So are we going to stream or are we going
We
to?
are doing both, and it should be coming up here. Should be starting, and we're live. So
Awesome.
thank y'all for coming.
Yeah.
Seems a little. Again, I know we have several folks that are going to be joining us online, but we have some that are here, and I'm glad you're here. And we're going to be getting we'll have some question and answer time here in just a little bit. Let me, just by way of introduction, for those that don't know and for those that are probably watching, just by way of introduction, of course, my name is Alan King. I'm the pastor here at River of Life Church. This is my wife, Regina. We homeschooled for 25 years. We're some of those parents that had kids like continuously for a really long time.
Yeah.
Our oldest and our youngest, there's 16 years difference between them, I think.
Yeah.
So we actually started homeschooling when I was kind of a full-time substitute teacher. If I was not a pastor, I would be a school teacher. And so I was like a full-time substitute, and Heather was a straight A student. Our oldest daughter was a straight A student, and her grades went in one grading period. Her grades went from an A to a D in science. Well, the science teacher was right across the hall from where I was doing a long-term substitute assignment. And so I went over and I said, "What happened?" And she said, "Well, we just ran into some problems during this grading period, and her grades dropped from an A to a D." And I said, "Well, I'm like right across the hall. Why didn't you come and tell me that there was a problem?" And she said, "Well," and this is what she said, "Well, I don't have time to keep up with every student. I have 100 students. I don't have time to keep up with all of them." And I said, "Well, I tell you what, there's one that you won't have to worry about anymore." And Heather was a freshman in high school at the time, and that became the last day that we had public school. We pulled her and Lauren out. They were the only two that were in school at the time. We pulled them out and began homeschooling. And it just worked for us.
Yeah.
It was a good decision that we made. And I'm glad that we made it, and we homeschooled the rest of the time. For a little while, I was the principal at a Christian school, and I allowed Sarah to go there for a while in the 4th grade, and Lauren actually graduated from that Christian school. But other than that, that was our schooling. We homeschooled from then on. So what about you guys? Have any of y'all ever homeschooled before? So everybody's first timers. For some reason, I thought Kaylee was homeschooled, but
She was in a Christian school,
maybe that's what it was.
and I think we're gonna use the same curriculum, cause it can be used for homeschool, but that's as much as.
Yeah. And so you guys are first timers. How old are the kids?
He's 6.
6. So just now starting?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, and just one.
Yeah.
Okay. That's a whole lot easier.
That will be eventually. but-
Yeah. I will tell you, now you may disagree. You may think it was easier to do 2 at a time. Most of ours, though, most of the time we had 2
Yeah.
at a time. Different grades.
Yeah.
Extremely different grades.
Yeah.
In fact, while some were in high school, some were in elementary school, so we really had it spread out. But it is doable, very much doable. To those that are watching by live stream, and I'm trying to do the stuff that usually somebody does upstairs, so I'm trying to watch out. Well, there's the chat. So if you are watching online, I have no way of knowing unless you let me know. So if you will let me know that you're watching, also in just a little bit, if you have any comments or any questions, I want you to feel free to comment or text them or message them to me. I'm going to give you my telephone number, and anytime during this, you can text a question that you have, and we'll make sure that we get yours as well as those that are here in the room. My telephone number is 828-413-2227. 828-413-2227. 2227. Hey, Brandy, thanks for tuning in with us. But if you have a question, again, you can just put it there in the comments section, and we'll be able to get to those. I want to say, first of all, about homeschooling, that it is one of the hardest things you'll ever do. But it's a lot easier than you think it is. And first of all, I'd also say that we are not anti-public education
not
at
at
all.
all.
Thank
Not at
God
all.
for good school
Yes.
teachers.
Yeah.
I support the schools. I support the teachers. There are some wonderful teachers out there. And I'm going to say this too, and this is something that really is important that we understand. Homeschooling is not for everybody.
Yeah.
There are a lot of families that I have said to, you don't need to be homeschooling.
Yeah.
If you have problems getting your kids to make their bed, you may just seriously want to think about whether or not you need to homeschool. Because when you tell them to go and do their work, if you can't get them to do dishes, you're probably not going to be able to get them to do their schoolwork. So homeschooling is not for everybody. The key is discipline, self-discipline. The first year when we first started, that was a little bit of an issue.
Yeah.
Because you get the impression, well, I can just take a day off and it won't hurt anything. I'm having a bad day. We just won't do school today. Next thing you know, that one day becomes 2 or 3 days, and you get and you have to catch
You
up.
have to catch up. Yeah.
And so you have to set a schedule. You have to stay on schedule. So important that you set a schedule, stay on schedule. Now, there are a lot of benefits. For one thing, you are in control of your child's education.
Yeah.
They're not telling them things that you don't agree with. One of the things that aggravated me when I was a substitute teacher was the amount of time that our kids spend in public school doing things like watching movies, some of which I wouldn't allow my kids to watch at home. But I walked in one day to a classroom and the teacher had left for me the assignment of showing the movie that I thought, I wouldn't let my kids watch this. But that's what the assignment was for that day, because they just had a free day. And so I turned off the lights and started the movie, and that was the day. So, with homeschooling, you determine, you're in control of your child's education. You set the agenda. You set the schedule, which is great. You can here's the thing that I love about homeschooling, and you jump in here anytime because I don't want to do all this, because you were the one that did the teaching. I was the principal. I'm the one that got to make them behave, but she was the one that did all the work. But one of the things that I love about homeschooling is they're in school for 6, 7 hours a day. In homeschooling, we got so much done in 2 or 3 hours. Because the teacher is not having to deal with all of these students. You got one student, and you can finish a whole day of schooling if you're really concentrated and deliberate. You can finish in 2 or 3 hours, and you're done. Now, not every time. In high school, I think it gets a little bit more difficult. Yeah, but for elementary school, you can get done really quickly. You don't have to take all the days. Like if they have a teacher's work day, you don't have to take that. If they have 2 weeks for Christmas, you just take a week. If you want to, you set the agenda. What we tried to do was set it up to where pretty much we started school in September.
Yeah, and kind of ran with the public school.
To a point. No snow days. Snow days, my kids went to school.
Yeah.
That was great.
To a point, we would do they would have their, we didn't have to do the teachers' work days and things unless we wanted to, but we could do them a different day. But we also, the vacation days, just to kind of work, a lot of times we just kind of set our schedule like the public school. There is, we'll get into that, about the time. 9 months is what you need to do for your school.
You have to do 180 days.
180 days, yeah. So however you work that in, the 180 days. And that's in a year. So you set your schedule. If you want to start 1st of August, you start 1st of August. If you want to run September to September, 180 days. You just need to get the 180 days that you are going to do in the year. So that's important, yeah.
But the way it worked for us, because we were involved in youth camps and things like that, so normally we would start in September and we would end in May, early May. because we wanted it behind us. But you have to stay on schedule to do that. You have to get your 180 days. There were times we did school on Saturday if we had to catch up. And so those are things but set that schedule and stick to it.
Yeah.
But you get so much more done in so much less time. There's more attention because you, of course, got a smaller classroom size. The teacher-student ratio is so much better because it's 1-to-1. Economically, it's better because you don't have to buy so many school clothes. And I don't know if it's still like this now, but I remember when my kids were in public school, it seemed like every day they were coming home and having to have money for something. I'm like, what happened to free education? And it wasn't cheap. There were times they were coming home, you know, hey, Mom, I need $100 today, or I need $50 today, or I need $20. But you don't have that with homeschooling. Of course, you buy the curriculum, and we'll talk more about that a little bit later. But here's one of my favorite things about it, and I know as the teacher, she's more into the really serious stuff. But I love the fact that we could go on vacation anytime we wanted to. We didn't have to go to Myrtle Beach in the middle of July when everybody else was there. We could go in September if we wanted to. We could go anytime. We would take missions trips, and you know, because they go on field trips in school. The field trips are allowed, and they go to Washington. They go to different places. We would go on mission trips to New Mexico and South Dakota, and our kids would go, and it was a field trip.
It's amazing the historical and geographical things you can find at places. Now, of course, you can't do that all the time. You have to have your work in. However, so many times, like when you would go, you would be surprised how many historical places are simply on the coast of North Carolina, South Carolina. It's amazing. And so you could go and that you would go and you would deliberately plan days in your trip to have history lessons. And it's just, I really enjoyed that. I enjoy exploring. So that was a lot of fun for me with the kids, just to take them and go to the forts, go to Fort Macon, go to the Charleston and study we would go on the tours, the historical tours there. And I loved it. It was a lot. You'd learn a lot.
And you make that a part of your trip. You say, okay, we're going to take this much time, even though it's something you enjoy doing, but you say, this is for school. So we get to count this as school because
that day.
That day.
Yeah.
So they didn't miss school, even though we were out of town, they still didn't miss school. And that was allowable because it was like a field trip for us. And of course, there are some challenges. There are the self-discipline thing, the times when they want to press you to say, how much can I get by with? Like I don't want to get up today. I don't want to do school today. You know, when they're going to public school, they have to because they're going to get in trouble. But you've got to be able to be disciplined enough with them as you say, look, just give me 2 or 3 hours. Let's get through it, and then we're done. You will need to find a way. You know, what is it? Let me just throw this out to you. What do you always hear about homeschool kids? Everybody always says the same thing about homeschool kids. Don't have any socialization. I've heard that so many times. They don't have any socialization. That just wasn't the case with my kids. All 4 of my girls are very social. And they know how to behave in public. They know how to interact with people. I think they were more mature because they weren't hanging out with people in the school that was teaching them things that I didn't want them to know. So my girls have always been a little more mature. It's funny because our second oldest daughter, Lauren, she actually graduated from Appalachian State summa cum laude, which means she was in the top 1% of her class. So all those who say that homeschoolers are dumb, no. The matter of fact, how many years has it been now that the international spelling bee champion has been a homeschooler? But Lauren finished in the top 1% of her class and became a public school teacher. I'm not sure how that happened. She's not now because of the discipline in the classroom, and she's just not doing it anymore. But anyway, but they always say, well, you know, the kids aren't socially engaged. You have to make an effort. You have to get them around other kids. And there's some wonderful ways to do that because you have some great homeschool associations.
On
Get them
Facebook.
on Facebook.
You can look on Facebook, and there's a Hickory Homeschool Association you
Yeah.
can look at. Your local church, get them involved with your church. Get them involved with activities like rec sports and things.
And
That's
you
all
can
good.
do that. I mean, you find ways to keep them interactive. One thing too is when they get into high school, you have to be your child's own guidance
Yeah.
counselor.
That's-
Guidance
yeah.
counselors are responsible for helping your child find scholarships and get into college and things like that. You have to do that. You have to be diligent to say, okay, they're a sophomore. Let's start looking at scholarship opportunities. Let's start looking at colleges. Let's start looking at what's the best way to do this. And that was one of the challenges I think that
Yeah.
we faced was
Yeah.
was being able to help with that. And so you have to be mindful of that as they get older. Of course, y'all got a way now. Sharon, you're not as far away from that, but y'all got a ways to go before you have to worry about that.
I would just want to share a couple of things about when you're preparing and if this is what you would decide that you're going to do. We're talking about the discipline. I would highly suggest before that you did any preparation to homeschool that you go ahead and pick where you're going to do the homeschooling. Go ahead and don't even, if I may even suggest, and some people might, that's just silly, but if I might even go so far as to suggest that you would, before you buy a pencil, that you will already have in your mind where you are going to store the crayons, where you're going to store the pencils, where you're going to store the books, what place will your students be doing their schoolwork. A lot of times people do on their kitchen table. That is great if all of them finish at the same time and you can get it all picked up and out of the way before supper. But if there's something that happens, you've got that issue that you've got to deal with. Okay, we got to get the schoolwork up, let's get it up. So I would suggest having that place and you knowing, because you may think, well, that's not going to be an issue. Believe me.
Yeah.
It can be an issue. Just simply knowing this is where my kids do their schoolwork. This is where I have all their supplies. Therefore, when I get up in the morning and I'm trying to get the school going, I'm not having to go and look around the house for the last place that we happen to do their schoolwork. So I would highly suggest going ahead, picking it out, saying this is where we're going to do our school. This is the places we're going to put everything. I need to buy a desk. A lot of times you can go to thrift stores and buy a desk very inexpensively for your student. For a long time, I had a school desk that I had in my house for the kids. And that's where they would sit and do their schoolwork. As they got older, we had another desk that we would use. Then they would go sometimes to the living room table. So it's just variable, but make sure that you have that settled in your mind, or because that first day when you come in, you think I'm gonna get started, you would be surprised how much stress that will put on you. But if you already have that settled, that's a good thing.
And it helps
It's a
bring
good
in
thing.
order.
Yeah.
We would always have, and it wasn't always a room that was just the school room. The good thing is the last few years we were able to have one room that was the school room. We even called it that. We said it's in the school room because when it came time to do school, they went into that room because we had enough rooms in the house to do it. It wasn't always the case.
No.
Sometimes it was a corner in the bedroom or it was a corner in a dining room where the desk would sit. But have that place because it brings an order, and they know when I go there, I'm doing school. If you get into the thing to where you just let them do school wherever, you don't have order. As much as you can bring order. So have that in place.
And to just reiterate, it doesn't have to be expensive.
Right.
Take advantage of thrift stores. Take advantage of Goodwill. Take advantage of different places if you feel comfortable with that. Go in, they will have desks, they will have filing cabinets, they will have different things that you can use.
Don't worry, you're going to have so many filing cabinets. Because you have to keep up with everything, but you need a filing cabinet.
A small, just get
Just
you
a
one
small
of
one.
those small filing cabinets, just to keep your work.
Because we're going to talk about record keeping here in a minute. It's going to be important that you keep records. So get the first thing to buy is a filing cabinet. But again, don't go out and spend a couple $100 You can find those.
You can
Any
find
of the
those
thrift stores?
usually at a thrift store, especially like Foothills, the one down in Drexel.
We were at one time we were begging people to please take filing cabinets. We had so many because we had 4 different kids and they all had their own filing cabinet. We were like, please take this, please. We got filing cabinets, please take them.
Take a filing cabinet.
So there's people out there that have those. Let's talk about the legal stuff because this is usually where people have the biggest problem because everybody fears the government. Because they can really, they'll put you in jail if you don't do it right. North Carolina is actually considered to be what we call a medium regulation state for homeschooling. They have more rules than a lot of states, but they don't have as many as some others. They're kind of like right in the middle. But we have found North Carolina to be a very parent-friendly process. For the things that you're going to need to get started and to run a homeschool. But it's up to you. They will help you, and they are very kind. You can talk to people. You can do about everything we do, we can do online. But there's some things that you've got to do. You got to make sure that you have the proper educational credentials, and we'll talk about that in a minute. You have to. I'm going to say this 50 times before we get done, but you've got to understand this. You have got to file a notice of intent. Don't just go in and start keeping them at home and saying we're homeschooling. You got to file a notice of intent, and you do that
just
online.
A word, if you have already had a homeschool and you have already filed a letter of intent, you do not have to refile that. If you closed your homeschool, you just have to go reopen the homeschool. You have to go and say, I want to reopen my homeschool.
So if you've ever, and since y'all are all first timers, but folks that are watching online, if you've ever opened it, you don't have to, but you do have to make sure that they know that you're open. You can't just keep them out of school and say, well, we're homeschooling. You have to file a notice of intent. I'll tell you how to do that in just a minute. Track attendance. Again, you got to have 180 days accounted for. And then plan for annual standardized testing, or EOGs. And Regina, I'll have her tell you more about that in a little bit when we get to that part. But being fully aware of what's expected can put you on a firmer footing for teaching at home. There is a department that you will need to get familiar with. It is called the NCDNPE, or the North Carolina Department of Non-Public Education. The North Carolina Department of Non-Public Education. I have put their website there on the handout sheet that I gave you. For those that are watching online, get ready to write this down. It's a big long what do they call that? The URL, but it is basically www.dnpesys.nc.gov. www.dnpesys.nc.gov. Or you can just do a Google search, just North Carolina Department of Non-Public Education, and it'll come up. The North Carolina Division or Department of Non-Public Education is the division of the state government that regulates homeschooling. And in fact, it's the only one like it in the country. North Carolina is the only state in the United States that has a separate group or separate division just for homeschoolers. They are very easy to work with. They are not out to shut you down. They're not out to, even though you are going to get letters, you're going to feel like it. You're going to feel like everybody in the world's against you homeschooling. How dare you keep your kids out of public school? A whole lot of that has to do with money. Because for every day that your child puts their behind in a church or a school desk, that school district gets money. Now, they'll tell you that's not true. It is true. I've researched it. I know it's about the money. Truancy is not because they care about your kid being in school. They're after truancy because for every day that your child stays out of school, they lose money. And so always follow the money. Always. It's always about the money. And so But they're not out to shut you down.
No.
They're not opposed to homeschooling yet. Now they're more and more. It's
Yeah.
getting to that point. But for right now, you're good. Some of the things that you need to do. First of all, contact your school, especially if your child is already in the school, to let them know that you are pulling them out, that you're withdrawing them.
I would think that would be only if your kid is in school. If your child, and this is really important to know, and we will, I'm not sure, I read it just a minute ago again. If your child, like your child being 6, you really don't have, you do not need to file a letter of intent for your school until your child turns 7. So if you send one in now, you will not have a student because they don't count until 7.
Even though you can go ahead with the schooling.
You go ahead and start the schooling.
But you don't have to let them know that you're homeschooling until they turn 7.
7. Okay. So, and that was really strange for me because I was like, wait a minute, I've got these kids who are, no, we don't need those. And when they turn 16, if your student is 16, you have to file a letter of intent. But after 16, like if they're in high school and they're 17, 18, you really don't have to file a letter of intent for your school. I don't know how that all works.
Well, the reason for that is your child does not legally have to be in school until they're 7. And they have to legally stay in school till they're 16. So they just have to make sure that legally, you don't have to legally start your child until they're 7. But I would not recommend that. I'd recommend going ahead and starting them so that they will be caught up and stay ahead, because you might get in the middle of this and think, I don't really want to homeschool anymore. Well, if you held them out a year, when they go into public school, they're going to be a year behind. So you go ahead. But you don't have to worry about the notice of intent right now until they're 7.
Now, if you're older than 7, they would.
Yeah.
They would definitely have to do that.
And when they turn 7, make sure you file the
Yes.
intent, the
Yes.
notice of intent.
I don't even know if you can beforehand.
Yeah, I don't think you
try
can.
to go ahead and file a letter of intent, but I don't know if you could without the student. I don't know.
I would try.
I would just go to that website.
Because
and
it
see if
doesn't
lets
cost
you.
anything.
Yeah.
It's free.
It's
It
free.
doesn't cost anything.
Yeah.
And so I would go ahead and do it just to see if they will let you. And that way you're ahead of the ballgame.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about it. Now Sharon, you will have to,
Yeah.
right off the bat, you'll have to do that.
I've actually tried to do that, and the website had crashed because
So
they couldn't
many.
support
There's-
the amount. So I would
Yeah.
say do it as soon as possible.
Yeah.
do it as soon as
And I
possible.
read that today, that the
Yeah.
website is just because of what they're doing with the schools right now.
Yeah. We just don't
Again,
know.
I'm not anti-public school, but I would be going crazy right now if I had a kid in public school, because they're going to be going some days, not going some days, sitting home doing this. I'm like, I don't know how that's going to work. So, but anyway, but just if you have a kid in the school, go ahead and contact them. Let them know that they won't be going to, we're going to homeschool, just so they know, because if
Yeah.
not, you're going to get threatening letters, you're going to get
They'll-
knocks on
they'll
the
wonder
door.
where they are.
They're going to
Yeah.
say, where are they?
Yeah.
And
And
but if you
that's
call,
normal.
yeah,
That's normal.
right?
Yeah.
So but by you calling,
Yeah.
and they may want a copy of your notice of intent, and that's okay. You've got it, so you don't have to worry about it.
Mine was just a little card. They sent me.
Yeah.
I don't know what they do now because we started ours so many years ago.
Yeah, but I got that
But
card
ours
though,
was-
even like
yeah.
a couple of years ago.
Well,
I
that's
got a
true.
card.
Got a
Because
card,
every now and then
yeah.
they'll send it just to say, just checking to make
Are
sure
you
you're
still
still doing it. You're
a
still
school?
doing it. And
Yeah.
I should have brought that card in here with me, because I always kept them on file. But file that notice of intent
yes.
as soon as you can, and you do that
Yeah.
by going to that website, that dnpesys.nc.gov. It'll come up and it'll say notice of intent. You click on it. It's really easy, very simple to fill out.
And when you get information from them, that's some of the stuff you want in your filing cabinet. Keep that notice of intent
Yeah.
with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
Do you have any, I know when I had to do that, they asked for a name of a school. Do you have any advice on how to name it?
Whatever you want to name it.
They don't care.
They
They're
don't
fine.
care.
Yeah, we called ours Higher Ground Academy because I was pastoring Higher Ground Worship Center.
Yeah.
And I'm like, Higher Ground,
Ground
we live in the
Academy.
mountains,
We
Higher
just-
Ground Academy. You
Yeah.
can call it whatever you
Yeah.
want to. But you will have to name it. That's
Yeah.
a good point.
And
You
it
will have to
will
give
be
it
the name of your school from now on.
Yeah, you can't change
You won't
that.
be able to change it, if that's the name of your school.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
I got
Yeah.
this, this actually covers
Yeah.
that. This came from the website. Families with children between 7 and 16 years
That's
of
what I was
age
looking for.
who wish to homeschool are required to file a notice of intent.
Yeah.
This intent form will include information such as whether or not the parent holds a high school diploma or equivalent, which
Yeah.
you'll have to do. You can have a GED or a high school diploma or equivalent. The chosen name of the homeschool, the
Mm-hmm.
name of the administrator, and the homeschool address. If any of that changes, you have to
Let
keep
them
it on
know.
file and let them know.
Yeah.
I was listed as the administrator. She was the teacher, but I was listed as the administrator. Even though there were, I hardly ever did the homeschooling. She did that, but I was still listed as the administrator. And again, just pick a name that's, you can be as cool with it or as plain, just however, just name it. You can name it, I don't know what your last name is, but you could just name it the Smith Academy or
Yeah.
the Smith School, whatever. Your last name's not Smith, is it? Okay. Wouldn't that be cool if it wasn't? But yeah, you just choose a name and make sure you choose one that you like, because like
Yeah.
I said, it is going to be from now on, because you can't change that. Families can file their intent to homeschool at any time of the year. The North Carolina Department of Non-Public Education requests that families update their record if their homeschool address changes, and also notify them if they will be closing their homeschool. And again, you can close it anytime you want to. And just if you decide to reopen it, just let them know we're reopened. Families do not need to renew their intent every year. So because once you do it, it's done. You don't ever have to do it again. Even though, like I said,
You used to have to do that. When we
Yeah.
first started, every year we'd have to tell them how many students we had.
yeah.
Every year.
And again, if you, every couple of years, you're just going to get a card in the mail that says, we're just checking to make sure you're still homeschooling. And all you do is just mark. No, I think you actually call a number and you don't even have to
At
talk to
that
anybody.
time, but now I think it's probably online.
Probably online.
Yeah.
I know I used to have to call
Yeah.
because as the administrator, I had to call, and I just had to call and punch in a number.
Yeah.
And like they give you a
You'll have-
homeschooling
yeah.
number. You'll punch in that number and just hit yes and say, whatever, press 1 for yes, that kind of thing. Just to let them know, we're still going. But again, they're really great to work with, really easy. What are the requirements to homeschool? Parents must have at least a high school diploma or equivalent. Again, a GED is fine for that. They must file a notice of intent to homeschool with the North Carolina Department of Non-Public Education. Families should keep attendance and immunization records on file for each homeschool student. You may never be asked for them. I don't know that we were never asked for immunization records, but we had to keep them. You just have to do it in case you're ever asked. I don't know why you would ever be asked, but just in case, you will make sure that you've got it. Homeschool students should take a nationally standardized test each year and keep the results on record for 1 year. So every year at the end of the year, you will need to do an EOG, just like they do in the public schools. And Regina
Yes.
can give you more information about that, because you don't want to just give them something. You want to make sure, for the sake of, number one, to make sure that what you're doing is working. That is a great standard to be able to go to somebody. We use a place called
Crosspoint Educational Services. If you would want to write the name of that, is Crosspoint Educational Services. Now, they were still in operation when Caitlin graduated, so I assume they still are now. They would actually send there were, I think, about 4 different types of tests. You make the choice which one you would want to give your student. They are standardized testing that are acceptable in North Carolina, and the test would be given, and then you would send it to them, and they would grade the test and send you back your information. When we get to a point we're talking about curriculum, I'll talk a little bit more about that.
Okay.
Because there's a little bit more we need to talk about.
And Crosspoint isn't the only one.
No,
There are a
there's
lot
a
of There are
lot. You
even
need to-
places
in Asheville.
Kim Turner, who goes to our church, she homeschooled her children, and I think they're all done now.
Yeah.
But she would take them to Asheville, and they
Yeah.
go and take the test there on site. We always
Yeah.
did it at home. just because it was easier for us, it worked better for us. But Kim would take her kids. So there's a lot of different options
Yeah.
for that. But you will need to do in the end of the year test. I'm thinking for 6 years old, I'm not sure how that works. I
I
guess
think
there's
with the
something.
6-year-old, I'm not sure.
I'm not even sure that they have one.
I'm
for
not
them.
even sure. You would need to research that for the younger years when you actually have to start testing or having those on file each time. I would just check on their website or call and just say, do I need that now?
And those are really good to have anyway,
Yeah.
because it kind of lets you know that you're doing a good job because you see where they
Till
are.
the 3rd grade. I may be
Yeah,
wrong.
I think it's a
I
while.
think-
Yeah.
In public school, it's 3rd grade.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think it's
yeah.
like the 3rd grade.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it just kind of, to me, I always liked it
6,
because
7.
it let me know, yeah, we're doing
Yeah.
okay. They're learning. One of the cool things that you're going to find that I'm really excited about little kids doing this, because I think it is so cool that my 2 youngest daughters, because my 2 oldest were already in high school and middle school when we took them out, but the fact that you're going to be able to say, I taught my child to read.
Yeah.
I taught my child basic math. I'm the one that taught them. Somebody else didn't do that. I got to do that.
Sometimes that's scary.
Yeah.
Because you sit back and you say, Dad, I don't get enough job.
I think
It's just
I think it's really great. I really like that.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
you'll have the opportunity to do that with the little ones. The homeschool should operate on a regular schedule for at least 9 months of the school year.
Yeah.
Again, doesn't matter when those 9 months are. You got to get your 180 days in. And it's so important. I can't stress this enough. You've got to stay on a regular schedule.
Yeah.
If you start taking days off just because
Yeah.
we don't feel good, you're going to get so far behind.
You don't
And
wanna
there
do
is
that.
nothing more frustrating in homeschool than being behind and having to catch up.
Yeah.
Because you can't do
Yeah.
anything. You can't enjoy anything
Because you're having to catch
because
up.
you're having to catch up. We've
Yeah.
been through that. We went through
And you
that
don't wanna
first
do
year,
that.
and it was so frustrating, especially when we were doing it with a high schooler.
Yeah.
Heather was not happy with having to do school on Saturday.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
She was not happy when it snowed and we couldn't go outside because we got to do school.
Yeah.
Well, you should have been doing your school. You should have been, but it was our fault too because you got to stay disciplined.
Yeah.
So I stress that to you. You got to stay on schedule, but that's okay because they got to do it if they go to public school.
Yeah.
And then families should notify the North Carolina Department of Non-Public Education when closing their homeschool. I've got some other things here about opening the homeschool, like when to file. All this is off of their website. Pretty much you can do that anytime. File that intent, that notice of intent anytime. If you're in the middle of the school year like we were, and you say I'm pulling them out, I'm going to start homeschooling. You can file that then. Just file it. Just make sure it gets filed.
According to this, you can open during the months of July through April. And must document attendance and instructions for that calendar year, and that includes the academic. They were already in school, so you count those days too.
Yeah, this is going to be a little different.
Yeah.
Like with Kaylee, because she's not going to have a month or two in
Yeah.
public school. If you pulled them out in the middle of the school year, they would get credit for the time that they've already been in class. But that's not an issue if you start at the beginning of the year. There can only be one school in a household. However, you can do 2 families in the same school, but not more than 2 families.
Yeah.
So, if you, I don't know if I'd suggest doing a lot with friends, but family, maybe you've got some friends that are close enough that you can say, hey, I trust you to let my kid be in your homeschool. But there can only be 2 families in that school. But you have to be really careful of that. Make sure you don't go beyond that. You don't need to renew your notice of intent. And if any time that you close a homeschool to reopen it, you don't have to file it either. The records that homeschoolers are required to keep in North Carolina do not have to be submitted to anybody unless they are requested.
Yeah.
You're not going to have to send attendance records. You're not going to send immunization records or anything like that. However, it's a good idea to keep detailed, accurate, professional homeschool portfolios for each student. Information that you might want to include in your homeschooler's portfolio are subjects covered during the school year, parent-administered or online school report cards or assessments. Keep up with that stuff, especially as they move into high school years. Yearly standardized test scores. I'm going to just give you a good rule of thumb. A 2-drawer filing cabinet holds a lot of paper. Just don't throw anything away.
You can't, but one thing I made the mistake of is you don't have to keep all of their paperwork.
No, not every test.
You don't have to keep every time you did something with your kid. You don't have to keep it to prove you did it. That's not what it means. But just keep up with
Like
your
report cards
your end of the year grades and things like that. Keep all that.
Yeah.
And that way you're covered. And you have to keep. I even kept, even though you only required for a year your standardized testing score, I still have them, just so I would have them, especially when they were in high school, just so I could have them there with me.
And as they move into high school, grades 9 through 12, I'm going to make a statement here that's going to make people mad. But as a former school administrator, like I said, there was a time that I was a principal of a Christian school. Anything that your child does between kindergarten and 8th grade does not matter. It don't count. Ain't nobody in a college going to say, how'd you do in the 7th grade? Now, they've got to have that to be able to do
What they do in the
what
ninth
they
grade.
do 9th through 12th, and to be good at what they do.
Yeah.
They need that learning that they've got till the end. But there's no requirement. Nobody's going to look back on that. Your kid can make straight D's, barely get through K through 8, and then get to high school and just start making straight A's and still be a Moorhead scholar, because they're not going to check anything before high school. But once they get to 9th grade, everything matters. Everything counts. So keep good records from grades 9 through 12. Keep everything that you can, especially because to go to college, you've got to have a high school transcript. Basically, that is, they go back over those 4 years and say, what were your test scores? How was your attendance? They look back over all that stuff. You need to keep that transcript so when they get ready to go to college, you'll have that, because that is so important. Having that information handy is really helpful. Also, if you decide that we're not going to homeschool anymore, you're going to go to public school, you're going to need that information. Because if you can go in with records and say, okay, this is what we've been doing, these are the subjects.
These are the test scores.
These are test scores, these are all these things. They're going to say, okay, they were in the 6th grade in homeschooling and they've kept up all this, so we can put them in the 6th grade. If not, they're going to have to test, and they're going to place them wherever they want them. So keep good records, so they'll have all that. Also, again, when they're applying for college, your homeschool transcript is as important and as valid.
Yes,
I know
that's
there are
the
people.
important thing.
There are
It's
people that
as
say it
valid.
there are people that say it don't count.
Yeah, it does.
It does count.
It does count.
Homeschooling is no less schooling. It is legitimate.
Yes.
I hear people all the time tell me, well, homeschoolers can't get into college. That's not true. My daughter went to Appalachian State University and became a public school teacher, and she was homeschooled.
Yeah.
So that's a lie that they can't go to college. And before she went to Appalachian State, she went to CVCC to take some courses. So they can go to college. They can get into any college they want to if they've got the money. The colleges ain't going to keep you out if you got the money. So a lot of homeschoolers are doing very well. In the universities.
And one thing that you will, and this is really more for people who are listening online, because I know y'all aren't quite here yet, but when you're getting ready to the 9th grade, go ahead and begin looking at what is required at colleges that you think they might want to go to. It may surprise you what they would require. And I'm going to talk about this in a minute, but I might need to go ahead and touch on this. Well, we can when we talk about curriculum. Go ahead and check on what they need and make sure that if they need algebra, if they need 4 maths, make sure they have 4 maths. If they need 6 maths, make sure they have 6 maths. Whatever it is they need, make sure they have it. But that'll be your responsibility to make sure your student has that. But the colleges will give you that. All you gotta do is call them and just say, I am homeschooling, what is your requirement for entrance? And they will give you that information, and you can go from there.
Because by the
Yeah.
time they get to the 9th grade, they need to have some idea of where they want to go to school, and you begin to formulate that. Now, what if I get to homeschooling and I just don't like it, or something happens, or my kid just says, I don't want to do this anymore? Can I put my child back in public school? Yes. Even
Yes.
if you plan to homeschool all the way through to graduation, there are just sometimes circumstances that make it necessary to return to public school. And in those cases, you need to know how to transfer from a homeschool to a public school. In North Carolina, there are 2 basic steps you need to take in order to return your child. Number 1, notify the North Carolina Department of Non-Public Education that you're going to close your homeschool. Again, you can always reopen it later, but you let them know we're going to be closing for right now. Contact the school principal of the school that you're going to be enrolling in to find out about their enrollment process. What do I need to do? We're going to put them back in school. What do we need to do? It's worth noting that every school may have a different policy.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
you can't just say, well, what do I need to do? What did you do to put your kid
Yeah.
back? Make sure you call that principal and know. Some of them will just let you register and come right back in. Some of them might want more information. Some might want that those testing scores. That's why you keep up with all that stuff. Let's talk about curriculum and material before we get done, because this is where a lot of people struggle. Curriculum and material. I'm gonna turn you loose because you've studied all this, but I'm gonna say this first. You've got to research it.
Yes.
Research it. Don't
Research.
just take what we say, because there are so many opportunities out there. There's one of my homeschool students right there. That's Sarah. She graduated from our school. Research and decide. Find out what works best for you. You're going to find out there's 2 basic types of curriculum. There is computer-based and workbook-based. Workbook-based. Ours was computer-based, internet-based. We used switched-on Schoolhouse that worked great for us. But research it. Because you might find out that you find something better than what we found.
Yes.
And that's
Yes.
okay. Use what works best for you.
A lot of parents like the workbook based. It really does. It's really your choice. I really want to stress this for you, because this is something I dealt with. When you start to homeschool, and we're in weird times right now, and I really need to stress this. Virtual schooling that your school is doing, where your students can opt to be at home, is not homeschool.
Right.
Okay? If you are opting to do the virtual schooling with your school, your student will be at home or will be somewhere, but it is not homeschool. It is still linked with North Carolina public schools. You will be required to do what North Carolina public schools tell you to do, and that is not a problem. That's not a bad thing, but you need to be aware that there is a difference between North Carolina public schools and North Carolina Department of, how do they?
Non-public education.
Non-public education. It's 2 separate entities. And this is one of the hardest things for me, because when I first started, well, what about your student? Are they not doing this? Well, they're required to do that. No, I had to be secure to know that my curriculum for my homeschool was my curriculum. When they did the projects, remember the high school projects everybody was having to do there for a while? The high school projects, we kept getting told, y'all gonna have to do a high school project. I was like freaking out. Who am I gonna send this information to? I've not heard of that with the homeschool information I have. I don't have to do that. I didn't have to do that. That was required through the North Carolina public school education. not through the non-public education. You really have to keep them separated because you're going to have lots of friends telling you everything that their kids have been required to do. And if you're not secure in that, you're going to really freak out. I know because I did. I was constantly trying to figure out, well, am I doing the right thing? What am I supposed to do? So you have to know, number one, homeschool is totally separate than public school. Totally.
Different rules.
Different rules. Different rules, okay? So if your public school says that you have to have I'm making this up, you have to have a 30-minute lunch break. Well, it works for me to have a 45-minute lunch break. It's okay. You are making your schedule. You are making your school. It is like, so does that, everybody get that? That is important. That is so important. It's very difficult because everybody around you will tell you what their school will do. And you have to be able to differentiate between homeschool and public school because they're not the same at all. Your testing will not be the same as the EOGs as the public school.
But still valid.
They're still valid, but they're not the same. Okay? So your kids are going to be saying, well, we had to do this, this, and this. Well, we didn't do that with our testing, but I have this test that is acceptable, and it is what I can use. Does that, everybody?
I think
Okay.
if anything, the test that we did was even more intense.
Some of the things, man, it was like, oh, okay, I hope y'all understood that. But yeah, the testing though, make sure you know that it's totally two different things. So when your kids, and please, especially online, this is not virtual school with your public school. Virtual school with your public school is public school, and you need to work through your public school to do that. Some of the ideas you might could use, setting up your homeschool and stuff, but otherwise, you work with your public school and do what they tell you to do or you'll get in trouble.
And my thing
Yeah.
would be if you're gonna do that virtual school, if you're gonna be home anyway and they're gonna be doing it all online, homeschool.
That's
Just
a choice you make, a choice you make. As far as curriculum, he has so graciously put some out. I think he's even got it on your handout here. Switched on Schoolhouse is a computer-based learning. It has your test. It grades your test. The only thing it doesn't grade is like your writing assignments and things like that. So it's really a very cool program. It even gives you an end of the year report, what your grades were during the year. Really nice to work with. But however, there is a cost. One of the non-benefits of being a non-public education is you have to foot the bill of the school. You do not get funding right now, unfortunately, even though
Which is not fair,
we won't go there. I did hear though that some of the funding that they're looking at sending out, they are looking at sending it to homeschools, some of it. So you might get something for being a homeschool. I don't know. However, your schooling will cost. Switched on Schoolhouse, approximately $500 for a year. And that's per student because you get with the year. The good thing about that is you get to use it again. Like if you have first grade, you can register and use your first grade in your house. In your house, you can use it again.
If you have another
child.
and you can sell it. You can,
well,
some of them you can, not all of them.
Not all of them. The books you can. The Switched on Schoolhouse is very iffy on that.
Yeah,
They're very with the registration online. Monarch is Christian curriculum. It has 50 courses. I don't know a lot about that, but it says monthly payments available, $39.99.
They have like a subscription thing to where you pay per student. A lot of these, though, are only going to be third grade and up.
Yeah.
So you're kind of, you don't really have the option until they get in the third grade. I think Monarch, though, I think they may go pre-K, but you can pay $39.99 a month, and that covers, you can pick any courses you want to. I kind of like that idea.
Yeah. The life packs are workbook based. which are great, about $100 per subject.
So you're looking at about $500 because you got about 5 subjects. Now, there are subjects too, that I will say this, there are subjects that you don't need to buy curriculum for. PE, physical ed, just get them to go play some
Go play.
basketball, go outside.
Go ride a horse, take them horseback riding.
Take them
You
horseback.
can do all kinds of stuff
Get
for
a-
physical education.
Get a membership at the rec center
Mm-hmm.
and go work out every other day. That's PE. And it counts.
Yeah.
PE is not there.
You would need to check with
I would
your
check.
colleges
Yeah.
as to what's required with that. I would do that.
There are people that are pushing for it to be required again because
But I
it used
don't
to be, but I don't know now where that is. We did it just because.
I mean, we would send them out to play.
for one thing, it
It's
was an
PE.
easy course. It's an easy thing to do.
Go out and play. That's
Yeah.
PE.
Go swim. Go to the rec department and swim all day. Swim for an hour or two. That's PE. So it was an easy credit for them
yeah.
to be able to get.
Horizons is workboook curriculum also.
Yeah.
There are things online, though, that I have seen advertised even on TV that you might be able to tap into and use.
There's
I would
so
look at
many,
it.
so many curriculums.
Research it, and see what you can find. You can find books, though. You can buy books from people more than you can now with like Switched On Schoolhouse and computer-based, you run into registration issues, and you're only allowed certain registration. You can't, like for your own home, you can register it for your home, but if you would send it to someone else, they would have difficulty registering that. And you wouldn't be able to do what you needed to do with that curriculum. And that happened as computers became more tech.
Yeah, they kind of knew where they knew you could. It used to be we could make copies of DVDs. You can't do that anymore.
Yeah, they know
because
those things.
They have
but
serial numbers
yeah,
and
so you
stuff.
don't want to do that because of the serial numbers and everything.
Yeah. Plus, it's an honesty thing
Yeah.
because you paid for it for one person, so there are copyright issues. There are people that make up their own curriculum.
Yes.
I'm not smart enough to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, she probably could have. It was just a lot easier. Plus, the thing of us having, once we bought it, Switched On Schoolhouse, when the next kid came along, we already
could use
had
it.
it. So ours went through, we got our money's worth out of it.
Yeah.
But again, research it. There
Yeah.
is so much of this stuff online. You can go and find so much of it.
One of the best things that I did with curriculum was in our senior year with my last two girls. One of the things that I found, math was hard for me. I'll just be honest. Math, I could do math, but explaining it to my children was like, wow. Sometimes it was tough to explain math to my children. That was just me. So there were times that I would be like, I want to make sure you have this. So our senior year, I decided one thing, because they weren't going to be doing things that would require certain higher levels of math. So we would do Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2. I concentrated on consumer math, business math, teaching them things they're going to need to know in life. And also, I found this absolutely wonderful book, and I can't even remember where I found it. I may have found it just doing like in some of the thrift stores, because I would go look at thrift stores for books for curriculum. And they had a math handbook that took you through your whole math experience and just built. And Sarah, the one who was in here, she told me, Mom, I learned more that year in math than I did the whole time I was in school. And I was like, thank you, Lord, for directing me there, because that helped me to, it was just a good book that I was able to work through.
And you made that a part
I
of the
just made
curriculum.
that part of the curriculum.
That was her
senior
math
year.
for that year, for her
Yeah.
senior year. That was her math.
That was her math.
And it's going to be easier for a
for-
six-year-old. It's going to be easier to find things like
I
that.
found, when they were first going to school, you could do the workbooks you have here. I don't know if Sam still has them or not. Sam's used to have wonderful workbooks for young students, teaching them their ABCs, teaching them their numbers, teaching them the very colors, shapes, all that you would learn in first and second grade, kindergarten, first, second grade. And I would use those and let them go through all those books, and it would show you this is what they're learning. They also have online, you can get these wonderful little books that I didn't know of till later that you could just flip over, and it says what your students should know in first grade, what your students should know in second grade. And you could use that and build your curriculum to make sure they know, I'm getting this. Even though I don't have it online, I don't have this, I can make sure I'm teaching them this because this is what they need to know first grade. This is what they need to know second grade. So all those are out there. It's just a matter of researching and finding what works for you and getting the right curriculum that fits you and your student, which will be important. If I could, one thing before we leave on this, as you're teaching your students, one thing that's going to happen is you're going to have days you're frustrated. Okay. You're going to have days that you're trying your best to get your child to understand what I'm trying to tell you. I would always call it, my teachers always call it balancing the equation. You've got to make sure that this side balances with this side, and you got to make sure that this equation equals this equation. And I would try my best to explain that to them sometimes, and I would find myself at a wall. It might be a wall I put up, or it might be a wall they put up. And no matter how much I harp on that day, they're not going to get it, and I'm not going to be able to explain it to them. I want to encourage you, don't feel like a failure when that happens to you. Step back, close the book, step away, say, you know what, let's do this one tomorrow. Because you will have a tendency as a parent to be a parent. And you will want to say, you're going to do this. Parents, how we can be sometimes. I encourage you, give yourself grace, give your student grace. Don't just say, well, I'm just going to throw up my hands and we won't do this. No, take a moment, take a breather. There have been times I've even told them, listen, you've got a wall up. Go to your room. Go outside. Go do something. We're going to come back and do this again. Give yourself that grace and give your kid that grace that you can do that with your student. Because you will be frustrated. You think about it. You think about how your teachers were with you sometimes in public school. And here you are, you've got your child, and you will find that. So give yourself grace, okay?
And they don't get that opportunity in public school.
Yeah.
But you do, to be able to say, just take time out.
Oh, this
and
is
we'll come
really
back.
good. Brandy Willis just wrote, Dollar Tree has a bunch of workbooks for kids.
Yeah.
There you go. So you can go to the Dollar Tree, go to Sam's, go to the Dollar Tree. When you're doing those early years, like first and second grade, kindergarten, first, second grade, you could do that.
Also, teachers.
Oh, yes.
Teacher's Pet.
Yeah, the
That's a
teachers-
great place.
Great
I
thing.
Kevin cards, quick
Yeah.
cards and math cards and books.
And you'll be surprised, if you have been working with your student, how much your student already knows if you've been working with them at home all this time. It'll amaze you. I mean, I'll brag on my 2-year-old. My granddaughter, she's 2, knows colors, knows letters. She can sit and read you the letters on a sign. And I'm just like, but the reason is she's already been worked with. Well, that's what they teach kindergarten, making sure you have all these things. So your kid is already ahead, and you'll be able, and if your kid does well. Now, one thing I did find out, a lot of parents say, yeah, my kid's so smart, they're finishing all their work and they're getting done, and I can do 2 years. When we were teaching at the college, they did tell us colleges really don't encourage you to see how fast you can get your kids through school.
Yeah, that.
Because even they may have done the work physically, they may not socially be ready for higher. If you would try to push them into college, they may not be ready for that, and colleges won't accept them unless they've tested geniuses, of course. So don't push it. Don't try and do 5 years in 1 year.
And
Just don't.
when you said that, it reminded me of something too. Don't get in the comparison game.
Oh, yeah.
You're gonna
Yeah.
have other homeschooling parents that are gonna tell you, we're doing this, and she does this, and he does this, and she is so much smarter than your kid because, and we start, we start comparing.
Yeah.
Just that will get you so discouraged.
It'll get you
Just don't,
discouraged,
yeah,
yeah.
just don't. When you're around other homeschooling parents, just realize you do you, I'll do me,
And we're
because
happy.
they're all gonna tell you all the things you're doing wrong, and all the things they're doing right. It don't work for you. What they're doing won't work for you. You've got to find out what works for you.
And make sure and understand that your students, their education's in your hand. So work with them and do your best.
Yeah.
Do your best. And one thing I was like, did I do everything perfect? No. I tried. I tried to do well. I hope I did well. And that's what you do. You give yourself that grace. Please, guys. Give you and your child grace.
And enjoy what you're doing.
Yeah, enjoy
it's
it.
great. I love
Yeah.
It's one of the best things that we did, I think, as a family, because it takes a lot of sacrifice, but it's
Yeah.
but sending them to public school takes sacrifice too. It
Yeah.
it all works out. Let me take some time for some questions and answers. Did you have
Yeah.
anything? We
No.
talked about EOGs, right?
Yes, we did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Brandy asked, what age do you have to start the letter of intent? Again, I think I would go ahead and try it now. And then if they tell you that you can't do it this early, then just back out because they're supposed to be 7 years old. So if they're 5 or 6, I'd go ahead and try it. All they can do is say it's too early. But just make sure, though, by the time they're 7, and I can't stress this enough, you've got to have that intent, that notice of intent. You do not want a truant officer showing up at your house because you did not register your homeschool.
Yeah.
And they will. You can get in trouble for that. So make sure if you file that, you're good. Can't nobody say anything to you. Let me take time for any questions that you have. I know we've laid a lot on you.
That's a lot, but I hope it's helped some.
And we're not by any means, we don't have all the answers, but
I would say when it comes to our kindergarten curriculum, how much time do we need to spend on kindergarten curriculum?
I don't think you're going to be able to spend 5 or 6 hours a day with that.
No.
Because their
No.
attention span is going to be so short.
I would just, there are certain of the workbooks will have it's like they're broken up into, like you have a math workbook and you have a color workbook and you have a shape workbook and you have these different workbooks. And what I would do is I would just do a section of the shape that day, or I would do a section of the letters that day, or I would just break it up in that way. So I go through everything in the year, and it's according to how long it takes your kid to do those different things. It would be up to your child. And then, of course, and you would be learning the different, and I would highly suggest going online and researching what my kids should know in kindergarten. Don't look at when I say that, you have to be careful not to compare it. But there are things out there that tell you what they should know, kind of what they should know. That's what I did. I would say, okay, we're going to sit down and we're going to do this. And I would do different pages and the different workbooks, and then we would be done and we would do other things around the house that kindergarten age kids would do. Does that make sense? Yeah.
One thing that I would highly recommend too for kindergarten all the way up, maybe even to high school. I mean, I know my grandson's 13, he still likes it. Every year they'll get a season pass to the Science Center.
The Science Center,
in Hickory.
yeah.
And that's good at, there's places at Myrtle Beach
yeah.
that works, or not Myrtle Beach, but
Yeah.
like
Yeah,
Wilmington
and-
that they can go to, and Asheville. Yeah, there's so many
I'm pretty sure it's in
places.
Myrtle in Florida. It's got different places. I mean, a lot of different places you can go to with that one pass. So I would
take 'em-
suggest that.
because you can spend like a whole day just taking a kindergartner to that kind of place, and it counts. It's a good
Yeah,
educational
it's a good
experience,
educational experience for them.
and it keeps it exciting.
When they
for 'em.
open back up, as everything opens
Yeah.
back up.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is those perilous times.
I'd strongly
Those
suggest
times.
that because it's a good educational opportunity. Sharon, did you?
Well, like, okay, so on the curriculum, like, I know Kaylee scores really high in some subjects. Like, her end of grade level, when we were at the Christian school last year, and I'm not gonna say what school she goes to, because I don't mean this in a bad way, but we retested her in that curriculum to see where we needed to be now. She's in the exact same place. She didn't learn anything in public school. I don't know, the curriculum's different, so I don't know how to gauge it, but, okay, so she's on a lower math level now. She didn't advance in math for the sixth grade in public school. She didn't didn't know anything about the sixth grade math in the homeschool curriculum. So, like, the end of grade test, like if I order her a lower math book so that it meets her, like where she's at, starts at where she's really at, then do the end of grade tests compensate for that?
They will show you where she is.
They'll show you where she is what they'll do.
But there's no penalty for that?
No. The good thing about homeschooling is you are making your own curriculum. Therefore, if your student needs to have extra attention on fractions, you can give them extra attention on fractions.
You can look at that test and say,
Yeah.
this is what, because the one that we take shows they were weak in this area. So
Yeah.
you say, we need to work on that this coming year. That'll be what we work on to get that up.
And you have that ability to do that because it's your curriculum, it's your child, it's your student. Instead of having to push on through, sometimes if you were in another type of schooling, what happens is, okay, I didn't get that, but now it's time to advance on to something else. So I am still not getting this. And math is one of those subjects that builds. It builds continually. So here you are, you've got this, and I have missed this. I missed fractions. I didn't get fractions. Well, in some, if you're in another type of schooling, they're going to go on to the next section. With your homeschool, you're able to say, we're going to stay right here.
Because you're moving with the whole group.
Yeah.
And the whole group's got to move on. So your kid's like, wait, I didn't get this.
I didn't get that. And
You're
that's
like-
one of the benefits of doing homeschool. It really is one of the benefits.
You can even roll back. You can roll back and get what you
Yeah.
didn't get. You don't get to do that in public school. To be able to go back and pick, okay, we missed that, so let's go back and get
I
it.
actually, when we first started to homeschool, I found out that one of my girls had really, because of a move we moved in the middle of a school year. The school they were at were teaching on fractions. The school she went to had already done fractions. So guess what happened? For all these years, she was struggling with math, and I was wondering why. When I started a homeschool, I found out why. She had never had the basic foundation of fractions. But I didn't know that because it just was like, well, she just didn't know it. So that's one of the benefits. That's really one of the benefits to do a homeschool. Before we go, I do really want to stress, I know people think, well, you're just harping on this. Please remember that virtual schooling with your public school is not homeschool. So if you're looking at this hoping, well, maybe they'll give me some information because I'm going to keep my kid at home and do the virtual schooling. None of this really matters. You've got to do your virtual schooling with your public school.
And if,
So,
again, if
remember
you're going to
that.
do if you're going to do virtual school, I just go ahead and homeschool.
Yeah.
Because, Brandy just asked, can you claim the school as a Christian homeschool? Absolutely. What I love about a lot of the curriculum that we talked about tonight, it is Christian-based curriculum. In fact, Switched on Schoolhouse, was very biblically based.
You have a Bible
You have
class
a
every
Bible
year.
class as part of the curriculum every year. But yeah, you can absolutely do that, and so that's because you
I don't know
pick
that
the
it actually,
curriculum.
does it say it on there, Christian homeschool? I can't remember.
I don't think
It's been so long since we did it. I don't know
the
what it would say
information
now.
that they ask for is so. They don't ask for a lot. It's really easy to do this, and they don't
Yeah.
ask a lot of questions. But yeah, I mean, you could tell people that we are a Christian homeschool. We were a Christian homeschool
Yeah.
because we were Christians that were administering the homeschool.
Homeschool.
Did y'all have other questions? Now, I will tell you this. Once the process starts, you might have a question.
Yeah.
And I know I'll help you. If you need to ask me, I'm gonna volunteer her because I know that she loves to talk about homeschooling. Call us, let us know. If you run into a glitch, call us and say, hey, what do I do here? I don't know. Now, I'm not gonna teach a kid. I'm not gonna do the research for you. But, if you run into a thing to say, hey, they're asking about this and I don't know, call me and ask me.
Yeah.
Or, if you just get in that point sometime that you just say, I need somebody to remind me that this is going to be okay. Yeah. Then
Yeah.
just text me and I'll write back and say,
That's
yeah.
important.
Do you know how many times that I walked in the house and found her sitting in the kitchen floor crying? It happens, But you've got to stay disciplined. You got to keep records, and you got to connect with other people. You've got to get some encouragement from other people. That's so important. So, any other questions? Anybody online got a question?
Said, I don't remember what you were the administrator or something, and she was the teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Like, does it actually require there to be more than
Oh, no.
one person do all of it?
Yeah, she could have been put down for both. Matter of fact, I don't even know if
think they have
it don't
teachers.
ask for a teacher.
It's just your
It just asks for
administrator.
administrator.
Yeah.
So
The one who is teaching needs to meet the requirements of the homeschool life.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
I think that was just a thing of when we first started, we weren't real sure.
Yeah.
And she was like, well, since all the mail comes to you, and, since you're the
Since you're the
main
daddy.
breadwinner
Since you're
and
the
all that
daddy,
stuff.
I'm gonna let you do that.
We just put us down. I don't even know that I would do that now because she pretty well handled it. I mean, the only time I ever did any homeschooling was when the principal somebody needed to go to the principal's office. Because we still had corporal punishment at our school. We still paddled. But yeah, I don't think that I don't think they'll say much to you about that. I was just checking to make sure if anybody online had any other questions, or if y'all had any. And I appreciate you coming, and hopefully
hope it
we've said
helped.
something that helped.
I hope it just pointed you in the right direction.
Yeah.
Because that's what we wanted to do, just
We-
point in the right direction.
We don't know all the answers. I know, again, I'll reiterate, homeschooling is not for everybody.
No.
There are some people that
Yeah.
are homeschooling. It always drives me crazy, parents who homeschool and just say, well, they're just learning on their own. They're just getting whatever they want to get. No, you've got to, because you've
Yeah.
got to keep records. You've got to be able to say, we did school for 180 days. You don't want your kid graduating from high school and not been able to write their name. They've got to be able to function in society. So it's important that you keep up with it. But it's not that hard. It's really not that hard to do. And the thing of it is, you get started and you say, hey, this ain't working. You can always put them in public school. Mm-hmm. But I love homeschooling because my kids, I never had to deal with a lot of things that other kids have to deal with. I never had to worry. I never had to explain to my kids why evolution was not true, why biblical creation was what happened, because that's what we taught them. I never had to worry about a lot of the temptation, a lot of the stuff that kids go through. It's not that I'm being and the fact of the matter is, when you got one teacher and 40 students or 30 students or whatever in a classroom, those kids are just not getting the attention they're going to get with you teaching your child one-to-one. And so I'd just soon see every parent in America homeschool, but I know they all can't. It's not for everybody.
It's not for everybody.
It's not for everybody.
No.
So no more questions? Any more questions? Any more questions online? Thank y'all for joining us online. This will be available. It's out there on YouTube, so if you ever want to go back and say, I can't remember what they said about this, go back and look at it, because it will be online, I guess, forever. So
And it is a learning process.
it is, very much
And
so.
again, I say, give yourself grace and give your children grace.
But your kids are going to be so much more well-behaved. They're going to be so much more ahead of the ball game as far as being mature. It just, because they don't learn all these bad habits from kids at school. Anyway, thank y'all for coming.
Yes.
Thank y'all for joining
Yes.
us. And I don't know how to turn this off, but I'm going to try to turn this off. And if
Stop recording.
you have any questions, let us know. I'm turning it off now. You ready?
I'm ready.